in quantitative evaluation methods as Secretary General of the Andalusian Forecasting Center and working with the Board of Andalusia. First of all, I'd like to thank the IOHE and the Technical Private University of Loja for the possibility of being in this Congress, which I hope will be a landmark in the building of the Latin American higher education space. We're in a session devoted initially, in principle, to knowledge management in the university world. And I think as a conclusion from yesterday's work and what I've just heard by Salvador Ordóñez, I think that ultimately, knowledge management can be summarized in that question you had on your slide. How can we make available to an organization the knowledge that the members have? That question has an answer, very simplified, which is by creating mechanism for sharing existing knowledge and favoring its increase. I think this can be a summary of what we've heard so far. Evidently, it's easier said than done. Therefore, this space for sharing knowledge, these are institutional spaces, virtual spaces, and in fact, these are settings, the construction of a common space on this continent, and virtual spaces worldwide, which assumes all of the initiative of Web 2.0, Creative Commons, open educational and informational resources. So we're in a world in which we have to match together the two processes, this creation of spaces. I'm a professor at the University of Seville, but I make this an example because I think practically most universities, at least in Europe, are working on at both levels. The website of our university, its image, is what enables us to see what we're trying to do. And if we get into, as we've seen with the presentation by our colleague Melendez, we have the virtual space, we have a virtual university underlining the on-campus university. There is an area, for example, for open courseware or for presence throughout social networks like Second Life, this virtual presence of a traditional university that's existed for over 500 years. Now, we're making progress in this direction, but if we're talking about institutional spaces, who better than Dr. Lamique for the magnificent presentation that she's made for us about what the European space of higher education is now in a European or Spanish university. This is the space that we're operating in. It will be improved, but the price is there. I think this is one of the main differences between 1997 and today. Now there's a point of reference, a meeting point, a point of convergence. So we're in the virtual space, and we have an institutional space, a common, broader institutional space beyond the nation that a university is located in. To systematize the initiatives that are underway for creating institutional spaces, Dr. Lamique has talked about the Magna Carta of European universities. I'd like to point out the World Declaration of the Higher Education by UNESCO, which affects all the continents, and fortunately and unfortunately is currently, all of its intentions are still in effect. As Father Luis Miguel was saying, that unfortunately the new one in Paris, is not making progress. So the principles are still in effect, and we have to work intensely to get this vision of the university that we want for our societies. The construction of the European space is another initiative that we've referred to. I'd like to talk briefly about the harmonization of some of the degrees and different professions within the European space. And just for the purpose of getting this up on the slide, the fact that we're on this continent and there have been initiatives like the higher education space, alque, that can of course be refined, and the Latin American space of knowledge and research. And I'd like to finish by pointing out an undertaking that can be the germ of the future common space for Latin America and the Caribbean of Mercosur. The World Declaration on Higher Education in the 21st Century you have access to on internet. I just want to stress one of its issues. The 15th of the 17 principles of the Declaration, which points out that it's necessary for universities to bring together all of their different knowledge and practices among the different countries and continents by exchanging professors and students and establishing institutional linkages by increasing cooperation. There's another key point in this declaration, which is that we need to recognize people's studies. We've already talked about the importance of the implementation of the credit exchange system in Europe in order to lead to the construction of an institutional spacing. If we don't trust the education given by their universities, it's hard to think that we could get anywhere. Regarding the construction of the European space, I'm not going to go too far because it's already been explained. I'll give some data points regarding the Erasmus program. The Magna Carta was promoting it. The universities made the commitment in Europe to promote these processes of institutional spaces. And also, this often goes unmentioned, is that there's the Convention of Lisbon that establishes the proper recognition and validation of decrees, which is a condition for the countries to sign to become part of this space. Of course, we can't read it, but you have this on the web. I'll expand on this. But let's evaluate what the Erasmus program has meant for Europe. The input-output matrix of a system with 27 countries to see how this has worked. The summary for Spain. The latest statistics published of 2006-2007 means that just the Erasmus program, of course there are many other ways to move around the world, but only in the Erasmus initiative, subsidized by the countries of origin, normally with those of destination, with a study grant and guarantee of the recognition of what they learn in the other country. It's been 22,222 students, and they received 27,464 students of a total of 153,000 participants. So this program changes the way that we can perceive a continent. If we see what's the cumulative figures, this from 1999 through 2007, we find that our country has already sent 235,000 of the almost 2 million people who have moved around. Now, this is up to 2007, and now there are the last 2 years, of course. So these 2 million people have moved around in other universities of other countries, and that the education that they've gotten has been useful for their personal curriculum, for their degree. This is transcendently important, and it's always good to mention this. Moreover, we have to take into account that these are the graphs. You can see them on the network because the fine print is too tiny, about the way this has evolved. The countries receiving Erasmus studies, only Erasmus. This is not the only source. For example, the UK is over there on the right. But they have many students who come through many other projects and arrangements. But in Spain, which is the highest one, we see that we're growing, and we're the country that has the greatest receptivity out of all of the 27 countries in Europe, and we're with 27,000. Evidently, there's much more mobility among the countries that are nearby each other, but not in the Erasmus program. We've already mentioned the process of constructing the European space. This is a long, complex process emerging from this brilliant idea of the four ministers when they got together in the Sorbonne in 1998. And this had the strong backing of our countries through the Conference of the Ministers of Education. And we've gotten to the situation that was described before. We haven't achieved all of the objectives, but I think this would be the positive message of the construction of the space. From the standpoint of the countries, we have to insist that the Bologna process is not only for the European Union, but it's also the European Union. The countries that were invited in 1999, here you have them. There were countries that were not in the Union, for example, Norway. But starting there, we find countries such as Russia that are there, the Holy See, which are part of this process of constructing a European space. So we're talking about something much broader than just Europe, but it's not the left of the Ural Mountains. In this map, I hope it's not too distorted in north and south. The structure of the color coding, the blue ones are involved in the European higher education space. The red ones are the ones that have not been admitted. They're countries that have wanted to join, and we've told them that if they don't accept the rules of the space, spirit, and values of Europe, they have been, for example, Israel and a country, Kosovo, from the former Soviet Union. All the information we have on all of the pages that Dr. Lamick has given us. Here's the Bologna process. We have all the information that we need. The Louvain statement, the latest declaration from we have the European space. What are we continuing to do? We're always going to continue progressing. From the commitments that have been undertaken, there's something important that's going to be remarked, which is the mobility. 20% of mobility for the year 2020. Here's a standard. Here's a measurable objective. I have to put in that 1 out of every 5 students studies outside the country of origin. By the year 2020, 1/5 will be outside their own country. This will be an immense volume of students. But this is the quantitative goal that we've set. And so we can have accountability for those who don't support this. Just political commitments. So we have the pathway, the timetable. By 2010, we're going to have a meeting next year to commemorate this decision. Bucharest will host the next meeting. But then we know that the Conference of Ministers will be in 2015, 2018, and 2020. So there's the political will by the governments beyond any changes that elections make. At least they have to go and be accountable for what they've done and haven't done in the meeting of ministers, evidently accompanied by the universities and all of the agents that we've referred to. We talk a lot about what capacity the European Union has, for example, to harmonize titles. From the academic standpoint, not at all. But in Spain, for example, the academic degree and the professional degree are intrinsically united. Professional study by each of the university programs is backed by the university degree. There are countries in which the academic degree does not provide the ability to exercise the profession, only in a few fields. The common denominator of all European universities is that there are professional degrees, that because they're professional, the European Union has the full capacity, but because they have to ensure freedom to practice the profession throughout the Union. This is the rationale of the guidelines in Europe that academicians are given, that how come you can harmonize medicine, dentistry, nursing, pharmacy, veterinary medicine, and architecture, and in some of the countries that have midwives, but not other areas. This is these are the one. This produces tension because there are two kinds of titles, degrees. These and the other ones. In regard to Mercosur, I think this is a process that not much is being said about. But then we're talking about it over a supper that Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, Uruguay, and Venezuela are involved. It's not just the countries of Mercosur. And also, at least from the documentation that we read on the website, and Colombia, there are frequent activities. I've clipped one because even though the document doesn't appear on the 20th, we're saying last week, they got together to study about the issue of university degrees for practicing professions in the countries of Mercosur. It's practically like what happened over there in the Sorbonne. It's not in the webs. The attachment is not yet up in the website, but they're thinking about it. So I'd like to get excited about this, that this is an institutional effort that may drive the creation of the Latin American space. So, therefore, we're at one point in this Congress where we're asked to reflect about what our role can be to design a model adapted to the characteristics of Latin American Caribbean universities. So the basic question that we asked before, what are we trying to do? Why are we trying to do it? How can we do it? And how will we know if we're doing a good job? The evaluation of the process. I think all that we're trying to do here and everywhere is to increase cooperation among institutions of higher education. That's it. Nothing more and nothing less than that. And why? Because this will improve the quality of research and higher education. Teaching and learning and research, the two missions of universities. Evidently, we can't forget that this is how the European space arose, that with this the workplace expectations will be improved. They'll get a better job if they're better trained. We have to educate them, which is one thing, and we have to train them, which is something separate. We have to educate them as people and as citizens, and we have to train them for employment. Those two missions, we can't forget either of them. A magnificent person who can't make a living because they don't have a good job would not be reasonable, but nor a magnificent professional who has no ethical or humanistic values. Therefore, what are we saying? The universities have to contribute to meeting the challenges faced by our societies, and there will always be challenges, there will always be crises and problems, and the university will always be in crisis because it has to meet the needs of a society that's in crisis. How can we do this? At least by noticing what has been done by those who have done something. The Bologna process is not a model, but it can be a source of inspiration. So adapting an understandable degree system, exchanging the exchange of credits, organizing curricula, promoting mobility. These are useful strategies. We could disagree more in tactical areas. Do we begin with graduate studies or not? When we began with the Alcuin declarations, they said let's begin with the graduate programs because it's easier. We may agree or not, it's a tactic. Evidently, by promoting networking among universities, which are truly advanced spaces for the Latin American space, I think this is a role that we have to play, at least in my opinion. Taking advantage of the possibilities of virtual campuses. We saw this yesterday. This potential, we should not fail to take advantage of it. In distance education and support of traditional on-campus study, the possibilities provided by technology are unimaginable. We can't pass by this up. Now, it's not a question of getting on an airplane. We can communicate with each other wherever we are. And evidently, quality assurance systems are fundamental. RIASIS has a challenge, and I would like to encourage you to continue driving on. to have a frame of reference now that evaluation is fashionable here in Ecuador. If we don't have a minimally consensus-based framework internationally, we can hardly make any progress in assessing universities accurately or not. How will we know if we're doing a good job? Evidently by measuring outcomes. There's qualitative evaluation that we'll always have to do, but I'm sorry, I'm a statistician, and what you don't measure doesn't exist. Therefore, we have to measure things. We have to affirm and give opinions. We have to look at the facts. In these issues of creating things or believing things, we can't believe on something unless we have evidence. So, if we don't improve information systems to be able to extract data from them and knowledge, then we won't be doing anything. Any evaluation model is faced with gathering information that it wasn't a priori designed. If we don't have a good system, there's the filling in of forms, which should be a regular byproduct of administrative activity. The administrative records have to be the source of official statistics. Otherwise, it's impossible to meet the requirements. Here's a declaration of principles that all the statistics put to show that, see, statistics is very important. I'd like you to believe that too, but I just have some data. And information about Latin America in the university field. In the OECD, they have that. Only Mexico, Chile, and Brazil belong to or as associate members of the OECD. We have more detailed statistics, but UNESCO, as the Statistical Institute of the UN, has a lot of information that nobody reads. That's the problem with statistics. We have these beautiful volumes on the internet, but nobody looks at them or reflects about them. Because often there's incomplete data because the national information systems are insufficient and fall short of what the international agencies require. There's some interesting information that can serve as an example to reflect on what we're doing. Here is the movement of students from the world and how the movement of students in the world changes among universities. We're not talking about processes like Erasmus. We're talking about students who are studying their whole degree in some other country to interpret the metadata of the statistics. Latin American and Caribbean, including people from this continent, then we'll see the exchange of this region. 1.9% of the students who have moved around in the world to study. North America is 23.7%, taking into account that there are 3 countries. So that's a major datum. And Europe, Western Europe, we're 1.2% because many Spaniards go to France and many French people go to Italy and so on. But this is an important trend because these are slow rates, but Latin America in just 8 years has gone from 1.2 to 1.9% of the world in a program where the other areas have grown much faster. So they're going from 1.2 to 1.9, and the increase in the number of students is a major increase. So we're beginning to have people who come to study in the countries of this region. In North America, we've had a decrease of 3.2%, and also a drop in Western Europe. The other regions are going a little slower, and we're beginning to have more mobility in our countries. But if we analyze the flows within the continents and how this has evolved, we find that these people that go from Latin America, where do they go study? Currently, 22.9% stay in the region, 43% go to North America, and 31% to Western Europe. But I'd like to stress again that this trend, 22.9%, is over twice what it was before. It's increased by 12.2% from 10.7 to 22.9%. It's doubled in the weight of those who stay in Latin America. And it's the equivalent of those who have moved among countries in Latin America with those who no longer go to North America, plus those who less go to Western Europe. We see that North America is moving back and forth between Europe and North America, and Western Europe, because there are 27 countries, most of them stay there, and 77.2% are within the European region. The area of Europe, but not the European Union. We have Switzerland and Norway and so on too. In conclusion, the creation of a space for higher education is a complex, long undertaking, but indispensable. If when we're beginning to build the European space, if we said this will be long, difficult, and complicated, we never would have done it. We've said here, a few people can do big things. Virtual spaces and institutional spaces are instruments favoring creation. We're at an easier historical moment to do this than before. And networks such as Zoe and congresses like this one now are truly catalysts of the process, and I'm sure that this will greatly accelerate thanks to initiatives like this one. Thank you.